Well, good morning, Calvary Chapel. My name is John. I'm currently on staff here, but in a prior life, I worked in law enforcement for a number of years. And for the first 12 years I did that, I worked the mean streets of Cyprus and drove around looking for bad guys. And I'm not bragging or anything, but I think I got pretty good at it, and I was arresting lots of people. And I would see those people out of jail the next week, and I would think, something's not working very well here. This doesn't seem to fit with my picture of making the world a better place. So it got in my mind that, hey, maybe there was a better strategy. And through that, I got involved with a ministry at Orange County Juvenile Hall called Pacific Youth Correctional Ministries. And I started going to Juvenile Hall every week and doing Bible studies. And through that process, am I in your way? Sorry, it's not the first time. So through that process, it was great doing Bible study, sharing the gospel every week. But I started to realize that as I was sitting across the table from young men, that they were looking at me and they were thinking, this guy doesn't know anything about my life. This guy's like old and wrinkly. He's never been arrested. He's never smoked dope. He's never done any of the stuff that I've done that got me in here. And it did make me think somebody else could be better equipped to do this. I think this is the same idea we see in Hebrews 4:15, where it says, we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize, but in every way like us has been tempted. And I ran across a young man, a person who at the time was a younger man, named Tim Alexander, who it is my pleasure to introduce to you today, who Tim has a different story than mine, but made him very effective as a chaplain at Juvenile Hall. And he's going to come and share a little bit about himself, the ministry at Pacific Youth, Orange County Juvenile Hall, and other facilities, but he's also going to open God's Word. So Tim, Chaplain Alexander, would you come on up?
Thank you, brother. Good morning, Calvary Chapel Mission Viejo family. So there's things that happen in your life and you go, you know what? This is one of my best days in existence since God has brought me on this earth. And I want to tell you, this is one of those days for me. I'm going to do everything I can, not be emotional, not cry, weep. But you got to go with me on this journey, okay? This family, which is Calvary Chapel Mission Viejo, has been so faithful for so many years. And so often, you don't know often if you're supporting a missionary in prayer, which is number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and down to number 50. And then there might be some financial stuff at the bottom, okay? So you don't know where those prayers are going sometimes. You don't have a clue how those prayers and the Lord is using those, but you just have faith. You just pray, Lord, I know you're using this prayer. I know you're using these finances. I know you're using this support. Well, today I have an opportunity to share with you what your prayers have been part of. And I know a lot of people know about our ministry because you guys have been literally financially supporting this ministry and praying for this ministry for 25 years. So I'm doing 2 technologies here simultaneously. That's Chaplain Steve, which is our founding chaplain. He gives everybody your love. He's actually in the middle of a big, gigantic move, and he's a little under the weather, but he wanted to give everybody his love too as well. And he's the founding chaplain. He literally started being supported by this ministry literally in 1985. So it is a long, long time. One of the wonderful things is last Friday was actually the anniversary of this ministry, 39 years. So Chaplain Steve isn't here. Can everybody just say happy anniversary to Chaplain Steve? Because he's going to watch this. So he has been faithful. My mom passed away from drug addiction when she was really young. And in life, God will send people that will literally be your family. You'll be adopted back in. And I was talking to Jan last night, and we were packing during the move, and Jan is Steve's wife. And I said to her, you know what, I just want to tell you something. When my mom passed away, I felt alone, like I didn't have a mom on this earth anymore. But I said, I don't feel that way anymore with Chaplain Steve and Chaplain and Jan. They're my adopted family, and they're just such a blessing. So what I want to do is I want to talk about the ministry a little bit, and I'm going to be peeking back here too as we go. Basically, like I said, since 1985. I mean, so literally almost 40 years, this family has been supporting this ministry. I mean, there's a lot of ministries that get supported for a long time, but 40 years is faithful, faithful, faithful. And so some of the things we're going to cover, that's a big, long list of who we are. We're nonprofit. We basically do Bible studies, church services, one-on-ones, counseling with kids that are broken, with addiction problems and violent problems, and they're in and out of juvenile hall multiple times. And my story, which I'll go into right now, which is unique, I grew up with a mom that was a heroin addict. I grew up in Anaheim on Pacific Street. And if you don't know much about streets in general, we weren't gang infested because this was in the 80s, but my street was one of the most poverty-ridden, jacked up places you could ever be. If you go on Google Maps today, you'll look at it and you'll be like, half of the buildings are gone, condemned, just dirt fields. And I go by at least once a year so I can remember who the Lord is. So my struggle was crazy. I was locked up the first time when I was 13 in juvenile hall, and I was a little kid, and I'm sitting there and receiving, and there's this chaplain that literally starts preaching the gospel. And I was sitting in my room and I was like afraid, like, man, should I push the button? And you push these little buttons and this is a big steel door. And when you push that button, when it opens, it sounded like someone had hit a wall of steel with a gong. So that button cracks and I'm going to go down there. And I went down to that Bible study that night. And the chaplain had something to say to me that I couldn't believe. He was like, good to see you. And I was just like, it blew my mind. I couldn't even process it that first time. So now I'm locked up for 2 weeks, okay? Now I get out, and 2 weeks later, guess where I am again? Back in juvenile hall. And so I'm thinking, I have this shame in me like, oh my goodness, can I even go to church again? Right? How can I go back to Bible study when the chaplain saw me 2 weeks ago praying to Jesus for forgiveness, right? To become a child of God. I'm like, maybe it was like a COVID shot that didn't work, right? I'm thinking I got to go back, but I was full of shame. And the Lord put on my heart, just go to the Bible study. So I go to the Bible study, and the craziest thing happened. Chaplain Steve was like, good to see you. And I was like, what? Good to see. Do you realize I was here 2 weeks ago and now I'm back again? And you might be like, well, how could he say that? He understood that I wasn't there because the police officer arrested me or my PO violated me. I was there because Jesus sent me to church again, which I would never be in. Steve was like, I'm glad to see you because this broken, strung out on drugs kid was back in church with Jesus. He got that. So I've been blessed to see that vision my entire life. That once again, reality so often in this world we're in is an illusion. The Lord is real. If you think anything else matters or is real, it's an illusion. The Lord is real. As we jump into the service, I'm going to be diving back into that. We're in a world that is tough, rough, beaten, broken, full of anger and violence and racism and politics, and you just want to freak out every time you walk outside. That is not the way it should be. And what this family has done, as I continue the story, you're going to see that your faithfulness and your love has done amazing things. So at the bottom right there, it says 500,000 kids we've ministered to. 500,000, that's a gigantic number, right? It's huge. That's just the kids. What about the families? So you start multiplying that exponentially, and you're like 500,000, and they have 3 kids, and the number is millions and millions and millions of people that this congregation and the love that you've dumped and the prayer that you've been sharing has affected. My life is absolutely one of those. So now you go, I'm 13, I'm in juvenile hall, and I get busted 2, 3, 4, 8 times. Now I'm 16. Now Chaplain Steve is still ministering in juvenile hall, and now this congregation starts supporting him. And there's money coming from this congregation, and there's prayers coming from this congregation, and the food that's going on Steve's table, which is nourishing him, is coming in to nourish me at 16. This family has reached out to me since I was 16 years old, and you might not even know it. That's how amazing this is. And there's more circles. Then I'm sitting in this church. Now let's fast forward. My life changed when I was about 18 or 19. I said, okay, God, I'm gonna walk this path. And God did some amazing things, and I got sober, and my life changed. And I'm sitting in this church, Calvary Chaplain Mission Viejo, 20 years ago. And Chaplain Steve is a guest speaker just like I am today for Pacific Youth Correctional Ministries. So it's like a full circle, right? So he's up here 20 years ago. And he's like, hey, I see him walking. I'm like, that guy looks familiar for some reason, right? So he starts coming up here and talking about juvenile. I'm like, that's the dude that was in there when I was a kid, right? So literally he was talking in this church about the ministry when I was a kid. And I'm like, the Lord was like, you know what? You need to go up there and talk to him. So I went up there and talked to him, and he was like, I don't really remember you, right? Because I was big like this, right? But when I was a kid, I was this tall, but I was 170 pounds, a drug addicted, right? So I was like this skinny, right? Like the Nightmare Before Christmas guy, right? I was just super thin, right? So I showed him a picture, right, of me with this big old afro, right? All skinny. He's like, I remember you now, right? So all of a sudden he remembers me. So I said, you know what? I was going to Calvary Chapel Bible College trying to figure out, you know what am I going to do? I didn't know. The Lord will send you on a mission and you have no clue what the next stone is. But I was like, you know what? I came into this church and I was here that Sunday. And I'm not saying that it was like that light in the sky opened up, but it might as well have been where God says, this is what I called you for. This is what you're supposed to do. And the ministry says, hey, I want you to do this for 1 year. I knew that day that if the Lord would move my heart, my mind, my soul in this direction that day, that I would be part of this ministry, which is part of this family, until Jesus took me home, and I will be. So now today, I accepted vice president of the ministry, Chaplain Steve. Basically, we're looking in life after the founder, where the Lord literally has done amazing things. And so many stories, like I could tell you stories, like as I was thinking about teaching today and the story, there's a story in the book of Acts, right, where Paul is preaching, right, and even one of the translations says he's droning and droning on, right, and there's a boy that's sitting in a window, right, and all of a sudden this boy just falls out the window, right, and he literally dies, right, and then Paul goes down there and prays on him. I was thinking, hope there aren't people falling out of the chairs today because I got 40 minutes, right, because I could be up here for 12 hours, right, just sharing how amazing God is. I just want you to know that you are part of that 500,000 times whatever it is exponentially. We won't know that number, right, until we get to heaven, right? But if I had a calculator, I'd be like, it would just start smoking probably, right? That's what you're part of. And people will say, okay, well, it's financial donations. Throw those in the trash. It is your prayer, your prayer, your prayer, your prayer, and your prayer. That is what matters. It's that intimacy that we have with the Lord that got me through the gauntlet of craziness in this world. But I cannot tell you how much I thank you for all of your prayers and everything that you've done. Because I'm the one kid out of these 500,000. There could be 500,000 kids up here right now saying, thank you for who you are. Thank you for being faithful. Thank you for listening to the call of the Lord. I get to be that young man that gets to say that. And there's been 500,000 kids, like I said, and you wonder, does the Lord love me? And the greatest thing that I've ever been blessed with, first and foremost, is my wife. But after that, I'm telling you, it is out of 500,000 kids, I was the one the Lord called back to this ministry to share with you guys just how amazing He is. And just, it doesn't matter how broken you are. It doesn't matter where you've come from. It does not matter how evil you are in your heart. It doesn't matter how strung out you are on dope. None of that matters. He can change anything. My favorite Bible verse is Matthew 19:26. And it says, Jesus looked at them and said, well, man, this is impossible. It's impossible to break your addiction. It's impossible to fix your marriage. It's impossible to fix your job or your kids. It's impossible. But you got to finish the verse. Through God, all things are possible.